Welcome to Twin Talk Politics. All right, hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Twin Talk Politics. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Miss Alyssa Antonian, who is a wonderful director of Penn Leads the Vote. And she is joining us all the way from Pennsylvania, and we have so many exciting things to chat with her about today. But first, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Great. The first question, and it's kind of a tradition on our podcast, is we like to kick things off with a dumb game of luck. So we are wondering if you could take that random 50-50 guess at who do you think is Jason and who do you think is Jerry based on our different color backgrounds.
Okay, I thought about this beforehand because I saw on your website that you asked this. And so
Yeah.
I'm just trying to guess already. I think blue, I think you're Jerry, and
Yeah.
yellow is Jason.
Wow, yeah.
The better looking one's
props-
Jerry, so the one with a blue background. Quick mental note.
Yeah, props to you guys on your website for not exposing it at all. I found no hits whatsoever.
Great. Yeah, well, now that you know how to tell us apart, I'm not sure if Jerry's statement that he's the better looking one is entirely true. But now that you know how to tell us apart, let's just jump straight into it. So just to start things off, we are wondering if you could please introduce yourself, maybe some passions that you have in your life, and how you got really interested and involved in politics/civic engagement in the first place.
Yeah, so hey everybody, my name is Alyssa. I am the director of Penn Leads the Vote here at the University of Pennsylvania. We are located in Philly, PA, so that's really big city, and we were a super big swing state in this past US election, so there's a lot of focus on us. I got my background in civic engagement. I'm actually from Mississippi, so deep south of the US, and I'm sure, as a lot of you know, there's not a lot of like civic engagement catered, like nonpartisan down there. And so in high school, I kind of made an effort to like expand that a little bit, even though there just wasn't that much interest among people where I'm from. So I did work towards that a bit then. And then when I got into high school, being in Philly, there's a lot of civic engagement around not only Penn, but the city. So it was super exciting to get involved in that at a much broader scale where there is a really big interest and a lot of resources for that. So civic engagement, just getting involved with the community has always been a big passion of mine. Other than that, I'm really into basketball and baking. So those are just some random facts about me. Being from Memphis, I'm a Grizzlies fan, so go Grizz. Which they actually were originally Vancouver, so you guys should support them as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just a bit about me.
Jason and I just are incredibly inspired by the work you do as a director of Penn Leads the Vote, an incredible student-run, nonpartisan organization that has earned so much national recognition and most importantly is committing to increasing voter turnout and civic engagement on campus. And we were wondering if you could describe in a little bit more detail what this amazing organization does, both during busy election cycles and the quieter non-election months.
Yeah, so Penn Leads the Vote is committed towards our overarching goal is 100% voter registration among eligible students by 2028. So that is our overarching goal right now. And I think we're making good progress toward that. So our initiatives include registering students to vote, increasing their awareness of what they need to do to vote. So even after you register, you still have to make sure you're going to the right place, you're knowing what's going to be on the ballot, stuff like that. And doing all of that in a nonpartisan manner is super important, as I'm sure you guys know. And we do have a saying at PLTV, which is that you vote every fall, every spring, every year. So we actually don't like to consider us having off seasons.
Yeah, wow.
Because in Philly, there's always a primary, and an objective fact of a lot of primary races here in Philly is that if it's running uncontested, or likely in Philadelphia, the Democratic candidate is going to win in the general election, those races are often decided in the primaries in the spring by whatever Democratic candidate or whoever's running unopposed to the other party wins their party race in the primary. So we always are trying to be more on top of it every single semester. Obviously, in this past general election, we had definitely more work put into it than maybe some other more off seasons, but we definitely try and make those efforts year round. And that includes going around to different places on campus and hosting events. Just make sure people are always kind of thinking of voting. We've really tried to make voting and civic engagement generally part of the culture of the campus here. So we want it to be a thing that kind of everybody does and it feels automatic, in hopes to make sure that all Penn students do it for the rest of their lives.
Wow, that's really cool. Like just making it part of the culture and embedding it in something so communal is something really cool to me. And I think what you mentioned earlier is such an important point that voting isn't just a single isolated act of, taking a ballot and going to a voting station and voting. It's also a lot of the background and unseen aspects of, like, do you know how to mail in a ballot properly? How do you make sure, as you said, you're registered or doing the research behind the scenes so that when it comes to voting day, you're ready to make that really informed choice. And we know a lot of these are outlined in your action plan of the PLTV that's being set. That includes many goals, like you mentioned, such as implementing programs and courses really centered around civic engagement, or as you said, achieving 100% voter registration among eligible voters at Penn by 2028. So we're just wondering if you could walk us through sort of that action plan that you guys created in a little bit more detail. Like, what are some of the key strategies or initiatives you're using to reach these goals, and how do you measure progress along the way?
Yeah, great question. So something that we kind of coined here, and I say that because I've never read the term anywhere else, but we have a initiative or kind of philosophy we call reverse door knocking. So instead of us kind of going to all these groups on campus, different college dorms, different athletic groups, we like to encourage those groups. We'll send them our messaging, but then we encourage them to independently connect with their members and send that out themselves, as opposed to us presenting it to them each individually. This is not only more efficient because we can reach a lot of groups by sending out these different messages, but when people hear stuff, especially among voting and kind of really important issues from their own community and people that they trust, it tends to stick better. So we've tried to employ this kind of reverse door knocking strategy for at least the past 2 years. And I think that's been really beneficial in increasing our reach across campus. So like I said, in our action plan, a lot of our goals kind of ride on us hitting different cultural groups across campus, different sports, different just organizations that may not follow us on Instagram, may not engage with us directly. But if they hear it from people in their community, then they're much more likely to take action on that and want to do it with the people around them. And I think that's been super beneficial so far. We measure this by, obviously, we get data from the city on different voting rates, and we can see where these people live when they vote. So your registration is obviously tied to your address. So depending on where you live on campus, we can track. Right now, we have a big map that we're developing where it traces the voting rates across each individual college house on campus. Wow. So by looking at that data, we can see, okay, the freshman buildings we're hitting are really good, but then some of these other classmen dorms don't have as high as voting rates. And so we know we need to target our messaging towards them. Yeah. So that's been super helpful, just getting data from the city. And then we also do internal data by just recording at our events, how many registrations we got. When we send out messages, we'll embed different codes to just track those links, see who's scanning them, stuff like that. So we've tried in the past year to become much more data-driven than I think we had been in years previously. And that's just been super eye-opening to see maybe parts of campus and different groups that we'd missed previously that we're now able to focus on and getting engaged.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool, especially the concept of reverse door knocking. And our next question is about the disheartening rise of voter apathy, especially among youth. I think year after year, we can see this reflected in the declining voter turnout, in the survey data, and even a reluctance to speak out on issues that really matter for the youth. But at Penn, as you stated previously, there's a very strong and clear culture of engagement that really seems to defy this trend. from handing out donuts and designing tote bags at the National Voter Registration Day to celebrating democracy through Love Your Vote Valentine event. That's by far my favorite event. And Penn constantly finds creative ways to really spark enthusiasm among its students. So from your expertise, what have you found to be the most effective strategies for engaging young people in the voting process and sustaining that momentum even beyond the events themselves?
Yeah, well, you guys have really done your homework. That's so funny, about everything we've done this past year. Yeah, I think exactly the things you said. We've really tried recently to make our events much more, I think, fun and engaging. So by doing a bunch of things that may be unexpected, like tote bag printing, just doing a lot of giveaways, stuff like that, that attracts young students, especially college students who just want free things. Attracting them is, I think, the hardest part. And so once you get them there and engage with them in our face-to-face, it's much easier to kind of get that connection point because you're a student talking to another student. And so you're on the same level. So I think that's one thing we've really improved upon is just making really engaging events. And that's not even just for US citizens. We really try and have options at events for international students, people who aren't 18. We want everyone to be included in that culture, even if they can't directly participate in it, and even at least not yet for the people who are under 18. So I think just trying to make it fun, even if you don't have, we've been really lucky to have a bunch of resources and donors who have been helping us with this. But even if you don't have big things like that, we recently had like a low cost, we had like a sticker making competition for people to design an I voted sticker, and people loved that. Like that was just something that everyone could take part in no matter who they were. And then while they're there doing it, we can talk to them about their voting plan, talk to them about the ballot. So just getting people there and then having the conversation with them, connecting on them at a base level is really important.
Wow, that's really cool. Just finding the common connection. So thanks for that insight, and we'll definitely use it in our own campaigning as well. So our next question touches on the nonpartisan nature of the PLTV. As a nonpartisan platforms ourselves, we know firsthand how challenging sometimes it can be to keep personal biases in check and present topics in a very neutral manner. So in such a politically polarizing environment as we are all in now, and especially as you said, in a swing state like Pennsylvania, maintaining nonpartisanship is clearly no easy task. So we're just curious and wanted to ask two follow-up questions on this broad topic of partisanship. So the first one is, in your view, why is it important to maintain a nonpartisan approach when helping people navigate the voting process or discussing politics more broadly?
Yeah, I definitely agree on the voter apathy thing. I think it's so tough, especially today. It feels like all your options, at least in the US, it feels like all your options are the same every year. But I think we've really tried to be a place for students where they can kind of escape the hyper partisanship that's been rising so fast. I think it can be really tough to have those conversations, and they are important to kind of get both sides of all issues. But to be the place where people can go to get a neutral opinion and get the objective steps on how to vote is super important. Obviously, not all organizations who are partisan, definitely not even most of them, do have ill intent towards people who may be on the opposite side wanting to engage in the voting process, but definitely being a neutral space where people can trust that we're giving them the objectively right answers and the correct resources on how to do things is super important. Yeah, I think a lot of people, even though a lot of the conversation tends to be very partisan, I think people do desire a space to engage with it in a nonpartisan manner. And at the end of the day, I've been on panels this past year that had myself and then people from political party groups on campus. And the conversations we were having were almost nonpartisan in nature, in that we all agreed on the same base issues regarding difficulties in voting, difficulties in getting information. So everyone can agree on these objective issues and difficulties in the process of voting, which is really interesting once you just have an environment where people can discuss it in a nonpartisan manner. And so we really do agree on a lot more, especially in regards to roadblocks in the US towards voting that need to be addressed for everybody. And I think for us, being that space has been really helpful for students on campus.
Yeah, just following up on that, what strategies or metrics does the PLTV use to be nonpartisan, especially when engaging with students at registration tables or facilitating conversations about voting?
Yeah, so we are super picky when it comes to picking our resources and like websites we give out to students. So a lot of the times we'll compile information from many resources that we do trust and we know are nonpartisan, and then present that to students, obviously in a very nonpartisan way. I think that's probably the most important thing is even if something says it is nonpartisan or a group says that, you might not want to take that at face value. We've had multiple times where people claim that they are, and then you can either follow the money to who like funds them or who or what information they're actually giving out, and it's not always nonpartisan, which is not a bad thing. You can definitely be an organization that does that, but since we do say we're nonpartisan, we do want to proceed like a nonpartisan organization, and so having the information that does give the objective positions of both sides. We like giving like transcripts of interviews from both candidates in a race, so you're getting exactly what they say on any given topic. So maybe not like trying to form our opinions when writing different like summaries of what's on the ballot, different stuff like that. But really trying to get the objective information. We use like government websites, particularly. One of our favorite resources is the Committee of 70. They're really good with information for swing states specifically, presenting it in a nonpartisan manner, and they give out sample ballots. So we've loved them. So just really picking your resources and knowing what resources to trust is super important.
Yeah, for sure. Just building on top of that and connecting to something you said earlier, we're just really curious about your experience last year, especially given how heated the election was and Pennsylvania's central role as arguably the most critical swing state for both parties. What was it like for you and the team at Penn Leads the Vote? And did it feel significantly different from previous years in terms of student engagement, pressure, or the overall atmosphere on campus?
Yeah, it was definitely very different from anything I'd seen. Even we had a pretty big midterm race 2 years ago, and that was nothing compared to the craziness of last year's election. I think we were definitely a super big focus of the media, people in general, politicians. So we saw politicians there almost every single week. Um, there
Wow.
was a it was really hard to combat a lot of the misinformation around mail-in voting at the time.
Mhm.
I think there was a lot of pushes um, by either just groups that were doing engagement in the city for people to mail in vote, which is definitely an option and an option people who want to use it should use it. For Penn students specifically, our voting locations are on our campus and they're on your walk to class. So there's really no
Wow.
reason for Penn students to try and take that path. It does take a little longer, and the mail system can be finicky sometimes, like the mail rooms at our college dorms. So we would always stress for people to try and vote in person if they could, if they were in town. And then there was also just misinformation in general on like how mail-in voting works. So people who even did want to mail-in vote, they weren't getting the correct information. So that was probably the
Wow.
biggest hurdle
Yeah.
we faced, just on top of all this information coming in and a lot of other groups on campus who weren't student related. They weren't groups of Penn, but they would table and give out information. And a lot of people
Wow.
would come to us thinking they were us when they would be
Wow.
getting this either incorrect information or they would try and register to vote. And these people would not either turn it in or they would not check it right. So their registrations didn't go through. We had that happen a lot. Um, and so just there's a lot of people with a lot of interest in it, but not all of them are either going about things in the right way or they're giving out the wrong information. And so that was probably a really big hurdle we had to face. But at the end of the day, it was really nice to have so many people on campus interested in getting involved with us. We had a ton of volunteers, a ton of groups who were willing to give us resources, and help us out in either funding our event or just wanting to collaborate with us on it. So there was very much a positive side of all the interest in us, but definitely had its own issues as well.
For sure. And connecting on the idea of misinformation and disinformation altogether, I guess from the US election last year to the current Canadian election and others all around the world right now, we're seeing how misinformation and disinformation are becoming increasingly easy to spread, especially with the rise of social media and digitization, often disguised behind the facade as political rhetoric. So we're wondering, do you have any advice for young voters who are potentially voting for the very first time in their lives on how to navigate sort of the noise and cut through the sensationalized partisan messaging, which may be false, and determine what's actually true and accurate to make a well-informed choice?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, like I kind of said earlier, we really rely on our Secretary of State's website for giving out information in regards to how to vote. So every state has one. I'm sure there's kind of an equivalent in Canada for different areas. So I would definitely always trust the information the government gives out on how to vote. Whatever they say is the steps you should follow. And whoever, if you are like here, if you're registering with a group that's like not associated with the government to vote, I would just always make sure you know that they are handling your information properly and that they are actually turning it in, since that is an issue we have had.
Yeah.
In terms of finding like ballot information about candidates, that's obviously the much harder part since the government doesn't really give out information about that. So like I said, just find a few good resources that you can count on and you trust. Always look out for if someone's trying to summarize a candidate's positions on an issue, always check out for really like either shortened stuff or just kind of paraphrasing. I really like to get direct quotes from politicians from debates or something, because that is what they say their position is. So hearing it from those people directly is probably obviously your best bet to getting their position from them. And then doing some research on how they voted in the past. That's another objective standard you can look at for how they would maybe proceed in office in the future. Yeah, just really finding sources you trust. And once you do find those sources, looking into them, looking into maybe, I like to say, follow the money, maybe who funds them, could benefit from whatever it is they're saying. So just really trying to think full circle on everything. It's a lot of mental work, but you just want to make sure you're finding the right information.
For sure. Now, for the last part of our interview today, we're going to shift the conversation a little bit to a topic that Jason and I are really passionate about, which is lowering the voting age down to 16. I think young people in our generation are going to be disproportionately affected by today's politics, and many of them are already very politically engaged with a lot of valuable ideas to contribute, but they're often excluded from the democratic process because of their age. And I think this often leads to feelings of exclusion, of apathy, and the long-term belief that voting won't make a difference. So in your view, we were just wondering, how can we meaningfully include young people's voices within our democratic process today and ensure that they remain civically engaged even before they're able to vote? And do you potentially think that if we do lower the voting age, that is an effective way to do so?
Yeah, so for the first part, I think engaging people who currently can't vote is super important. Here in Philly, we do have a lot of organizations actually dedicated to that. I was able to go to a conference this past fall that was Vote That John here in Philly, and that is dedicated towards high school outreach to either young voters or young or like high schoolers who can't even vote. We also have a Penn specific group called High School Voter Project that does the same thing, just on a West Philly scale of getting those students from local schools engaged in that. I think it's super important. I think a core belief of ours in research just shows that the younger you get engaged civically and the younger you start voting and making it a habit, you are much more likely to continue to do that throughout your life. And that's kind of our main goal here, is to make sure that people take part in their duty to vote. And that starts young. So I definitely think that even if you can't vote, getting youth engaged with canvassing, getting them engaged with and really familiar with the registration and voting process super young. So they're ready to do it as soon as they turn 18. Our favorite thing at events this past year was people who were 17 during the general election and couldn't vote coming to us as soon as it was over and saying, I'm ready to register now. And it's disappointing to see because you do know that there are 16 and 17-year-olds who are really passionate about this. And obviously, especially here, our Congress and our government does not reflect age-wise, belief-wise, the views and kind of, I think, the long-term goals of our biggest voting bloc, which is the 18 to 24. So making that even younger, that's even more true. And so getting them engaged young and getting them to know that it's important for them to care about it is super important. In terms of lowering the voting age to 16, I definitely think that would help kind of reflect those difference in values and the need to have a representative government. 16-year-olds, they're operating in everyday life. They're paying taxes. They deserve to be represented in their views. And like, as I've seen on our campus here, you go to college sometimes at 17 and you're all but an adult. So
Yeah.
I think you definitely deserve to still make your voice heard. And that would probably really help getting people engaged in it young and getting them to get the idea young that their vote and their voice does matter. That would make them maybe have that belief more so longer in life than kind of the voter apathy you're seeing now, where these people freshly turn 18 and this is the political climate they're kind of aging into. It's not the best. And so maybe starting it young when you're a bit more optimistic towards it and you're ready to get involved, you'll be more likely to stay in it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer. And now for our final and last question. It's going to be a fun one and a real Philly question. So when Jason and I were in Philadelphia, of course, we had to go try a cheesesteak. And when we got to the counter, we were completely thrown off by the vocabulary there. It was Biz, provolone, and American, and we got absolutely confused. So in your opinion, what do you think is the best Philly cheesesteak, order choice, and where is the best place to get it?
Okay, so I definitely think you got to get Cooper Sharp on a cheesesteak. I think Whiz is like, this might be a controversial opinion. I feel like Whiz is like the fake,
oh wow,
like the fake stereotype that is on them, but it's like not what's actually on a cheesesteak. So I prefer Cooper Sharp on mine. And Angelo's has like the best cheesesteaks. You have to wait forever for them because that's like, there's the tourist cheesesteaks parts and there's like the still popular ones, but the places that people know are really good actually. Angelo's is my favorite of those. Anywhere really in South Philly has really good cheesesteaks. Angelo's is my favorite. I get it with Cooper Sharp, peppers, and no mushrooms, which is anti what is typical. I think a lot of people do get mushrooms, but that's my opinion. And I think it's the best.
Okay. Next time we go to Philadelphia, we'll definitely try that out. And this time we can definitely look less lost. Go to
the quicker you order, and the just quick saying of the ingredients you want on it is what makes it more believable that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, we'll definitely try that. Try to sell try to sell the identity that we're not just new to the entire cheesesteak thing. All right.
Yeah.
I think that concludes our interview today. Again, Jerry and I, from the bottom of our hearts, just wanted to extend such a big thank you to Ms. Antonian for this amazing opportunity and taking the time out of her extremely busy schedule to come here and meet with us. We truly, truly appreciate it. For all the listeners at home, if you guys wish to see more interviews like this, be sure to tune into future episodes. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you guys next time.